Well, hello, folks. This is Idiots versus Idiots. My name is Danny. I'm joined always by my cowboy-hatted associate, the Big Man.
I am the big man.
As if he is the only large man in Texas. As if there isn't the entire city of Beaumont, Texas, that makes him look like Paris Hilton.
Well, I actually was on a call this week where, other people introduce me as the big man all the time. It's my brand,
Right.
yada, yada. Anyway, I was on this call, and this guy was trying to be, how people, when they're trying to sell you something, they're trying to get you to sign up for something, they're very proper. And he's like, Mr. the Big Man. He kept calling me Mr. the Big Man. And I'm like, that doesn't work. Just stop it. I appreciate it, but no.
I jokingly refer to your wife as Mrs. the Big Man.
Yes.
And that's only because I have transference fear, meaning you're afraid, so I'm afraid of you. I haven't even met the lady, and she's probably delightful.
Hey, there's only two things on this planet that I was ever afraid of, and one of them, he died years ago, and my wife. Anyway, what are we talking about today, Danny?
But I do want to tell you about a company that I own called Rise Lentless. That's RISELENTLESS. RiseLentless.com. Rise Lentless sells fun coffee mugs for entrepreneurs, the side hustlers, and anyone that dares to dream big. The Big Man, of course, is modeling his one of one, too big to fail. Rise Lentless X Idiots versus Idiots mugs. Our mugs are on the mugs. There you go.
Hey, for the right price, I'll make it one of two. I don't care.
Absolutely. This last story is a little inside baseball. As you guys know, Idiots versus Idiots is based out of the lovely city of Austin, Texas.
Yes,
we're completely full. Don't move here. There's too many people here. We're completely full. Tulsa, on the other hand, plenty of space. All sorts of vacancy.
Plenty of space.
Yep. And they got gambling up there. So, just so you know.
Only on reservations, though, but you can't move there.
Well, you can't live on a reservation, but you can at least get to the gambling.
You can't get to the gambling.
Right now, I got to commute 6 hours up to WinStar if I'm trying to gamble.
Right, so, absolutely. So the story is?
The story is Joe Rogan to buy West Austin Theater for new comedy club. Wants to make Austin new hub for big laughs.
Look, if you, I know you and I are both a fan of Joe Rogan. We've talked about that on this podcast before, right? And if you even remotely follow the Joe Rogan podcast or the Joe Rogan experiment, right, as it's called, you know that...
Or the Joe Rogan experience, as it's actually called. Okay.
The point is even before he moved to Austin... If you followed his podcast, he talked to comedian after comedian after comedian about what he wanted to do when he moved to Austin, right? He wanted to move to Austin. He wanted to create a comedy club out here. He wanted to continue to do his podcast, but create a comedy because him and the, what's the one out there?
The store, comedy store.
The comedy store had a big falling out, right? And then and he didn't find... His biggest issue with the Comedy Store was the fact that he felt like big names, if you weren't in at the Comedy Store, then you were out in comedy, right? And he wanted to create something that created more inclusivity with everybody, give everybody the power, the comedians the power, not the Hollywood elites, not the people trying to run things.
His falling out with the Comedy Store is well documented, and he had a comeback. Like the Comedy Store effectively... And what happened, though, is what's interesting is the Comedy Store effectively died. And when they let Joe Rogan come back, they had a complete renaissance there. And if you had, I had a buddy fly out. He's a big fan of comedy. He went to L.A. just to go to the Comedy Store. Right? He got a hotel near the Comedy Store just to go there. And he's like, you go there on a Tuesday night, and it's just heavy hitter after heavy hitter after heavy hitter. And what's interesting is Joe Rogan's been a guy who is very much as people might see him as a Hollywood guy, I see him as an outside Hollywood guy. Right?
He's not a fan of the traditional Hollywood, and that's part of what he says bringing this to Austin. He wants it out of L.A. He wants it out of the Hollywood machine. He wants it out of California. He wants something built by comedians for comedians. To kind of build a phrase there. He bought the One World Theater, which,
has this actually closed? Do we know if this is actually closed?
It has not actually closed, but this is the deal, right? Like this particular theater, like a lot of venues in places, if they're not ran right, they fail. This has failed a couple of times, been in bankruptcy twice, right? Or foreclosure twice.
Yeah.
So he's found a space that somebody like him, and guess what? Not only has he found a space, he found a space 10 minutes from his house. Right? He found a space right down the street from where he's going to be recording the podcast, where he can pop back and forth.
I think the podcast is he records that in an office in South Austin.
Is he doing it? I thought he was building a space in his, because he bought this mansion of a place.
But I don't think I don't think a guy like Joe Rogan is, and we're not talking out of turn here. This is all information that's already on the internet. I'm not interested in doxing or anything remotely close to the neighborhood of saying. But here's the thing.
No, this is all public. Not him buying a mansion in Westlake is public knowledge. You can.
There's several articles about
everywhere.
it. Yeah.
Him buying this theater.
One World Theater.
It was actually, there was some misinformation about, because Cap City Comedy Club, which has been here in Austin forever, which is why Cap City, capital city, right? Yeah. Comedy Club, actually bought a new building. They're moving off of the place that they've been forever. So there was some misinformation about, is he buying this place? And no, Cap City bought that place and was moving over.
My question then is, is Cap City done for? Right?
Well,
because
I don't know that.
Joe Rogan never takes the credit, but is often credited with, and by the way, this is why I coined the phrase business and marketplace, because it's a marketplace thing. It's not a business thing. But what is interesting here for me is, Joe Rogan was effectively the reason that the comedy store in Los Angeles had such a thriving ecosystem of comedy. And although he is not the first comedian to start a podcast, he made it what it is. He made podcasting what it is, right? And he is such I would use the phrase, I think, like anti-Hollywood guy, in the sense that he looks at Hollywood as this thing, this succubus that's consuming money. And I was listening to, in preparation for this story, wink, wink, I was listening to an episode of his podcast where he had Bill Burr on. This was still when he was in Los Angeles, and he was like, there is no reason for anybody to give up a piece of their podcast to some radio company. There's no reason for any of these comedians. He's like, if you just stick, he's like, the first 2 years are going to suck, but if you stick to the first 2 years and you're funny, you'll build the audience, you'll start making money. And listen, he convinced Tim Dillon, who was a favorite of ours, who is now, Matthew Cox was kind of our big target to get as a guest. We landed that on the first one, thanks to my genius and poorly worded email. It was a pity get, but it's kind of like I said.
A blind nut finds a squirrel every day.
All the way around. Listen, this is like in high school. Like, I got pity dates. I got a date, though.
Hey, it doesn't matter. That's the end
result.
The
date. That's all that I don't care if it's a pity date or not. I got the date. That's all that matters.
Yeah. No, but look, all of these guys, Joe Rogan definitely, I think, because if you've seen enough of Joe Rogan, that he is a unique person, right? And he's embraced who he is as an individual, and that has led to his success. That's what led him out of being on Outs at the Comedy Store. He wasn't willing to bend to the rules, right? And it's well documented and whatever. And that's Joe Rogan. You either take it.
Yeah, he went after
Mitzi,
Carlos, right? Carlos Mencia.
Oh, okay.
That was what happened. Like, he got dropped by his management and everything because Carlos Mencia was stealing jokes, and then he went after Carlos Mencia, and that was
right.
That video is still out there. Hilarious, by the way.
When they all got on stage and called him out for it. But again, the point though is, without all the drama, is he wants to build something. And look, he's made enough money. He's made it perfectly clear. He said on his podcast several times, I don't want to start this to make a ton of money. He's like, I want to make it a low-cost place for people to be able to come and give the revenue that's created by this place to the comedians that perform here, because they get paid crap. The average everyday up-and-come comedian gets paid garbage to go to these clubs and do these shows and stuff like that. He wants to pay them and give them the money. He's not in it. He wants to make it a place where people can learn and that kind of stuff.
And somebody who's, I'm not native to Austin. I moved here or whatever. the headline for this story was Joe Rogan, that I wrote a headline, which is the summary, which I wrote is Joe Rogan will create a comedy hub in Austin, doing more to keep it weird than the tech will. So a lot of companies
really like that headline.
Listen,
it's hard for me to admit, but I really like it.
Okay. But listen, a lot of these tech companies are coming in, and I think it was Tim Dillon was like, I was having dinner with someone. He was like, I was having dinner with a venture capitalist, and in Austin, and he's like, so he asked me, he's like, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? He's like, these guys are not going to keep Austin weird.
Right? No.
Yeah, and
no.
The city has a certain charm. And listen, by the time I got here in 2014, it was not exactly the same charm as it was before. And mostly I found that charm to be gross, and I disliked it, which is why I'll never buy a house in Austin. But the thing that I find great about this is that it's going to bring these artistic type entrepreneurs. I look at comedians. The modern comedian has to be an entrepreneur. In order to succeed in the industry today, you have to be an entrepreneur. And here's all I see from that. As a guy who loves the industry, but has no interest in participating or capacity to participate, I'm funny, but I'm not funny like they're funny. There's going to be so much ancillary industry supporting the comedy business in Austin that there's going to be ways to profit. And guess what? We're going to walk around town now and see cool people. I still remember I saw Dave Chappelle sitting outside of a Whole Foods, the downtown, the main Whole Foods.
Yep.
I was like, holy crap, it's Dave Chappelle. And he just kind of looked at me like, come on, man.
Joe Rogan is definitely it's one of the things I like about him is he'll buy into this idea, and he tries to get other people on board, right? How many people... Yeah. There's been 2 or 3 comedians that have moved to Austin since he's moved to Austin that have been on his show, and he's like, look, you're coming. I'm telling you right now, you're coming. A couple of weeks after he moved to Austin and started doing his podcast down here, Ron White was on his podcast. Ron White has lived in Austin, outside of Austin for a while, but he effectively retired from comedy. He said, look, I got tired of writing jokes. He's like, it's hard to write jokes. I got tired of writing new material, right? And he's like, and he retired effectively from comedy, and he told Joe Rogan on the podcast because Joe Rogan brought up, hey, I want to build a comedy club here, and here's why I want to do it, and how I want to do it. And Ron White told him during the podcast, he's like, I'll come out of retirement to do your comedy club. So you're going to get, with his kind of name and his kind of relationship with other comedians, you are not only going to get talent to come here, you're going to get retroactive talent from back ago that will come back because it's something different and new, right?
Yes.
To like a Ron White that maybe hasn't done comedy.
I think who's going to make a comeback off of this that I don't think anybody's expecting. Doug Stanhope. That's my guess.
Really?
My guess, yes, because I do think that they can drag Doug Stanhope kicking and Doug Stanhope lives in some podunk town in Arizona for no reason. And I think they can convince him to go live in Dripping Springs or, Fredericksburg or some weird town where he can go be weird and he can come back and do jokes and actually have a career again.
Well, I think a lot of comedians out there could get quote unquote second chances. Some of these comedians that may have done or said something really dumb, right, that effectively ended their careers or whatever, that could come down to Joe, where Joe Rogan's like, they call up Joe and say, hey, or Joe Rogan's people call up them and go, hey, you're funny as shit. You know what I mean? You need to come back to comedy, and I'm going to give you the stage to do it, right, down here in Austin, with none of the ties, like, okay, you were banned from here, you were banned from the basement up in New York, right? And give them a second opportunity, and it could be big.
There's a lot of comedians that who in the last 2 years got canceled, as the youths like to say. They got their management let cut them loose or whatever. And I think that Joe Rogan's the kind of guy who's like, you don't need a manager, you don't need, if you have an assistant, and if he said this before, if you have an assistant and you're a comedian, you're doing too much. Just do less.
Yeah, just do less and charge more. And look, that's great for entrepreneurship in general. Learning that rule in entrepreneurship, it's difficult. Believe
Right.
me, it is difficult to hand off things. It's difficult to, do less sometimes. Again, because we're all taught that hustle mentality.
Right.
But the fact is you can do and make a crap ton of money. And believe me, folks, it's worked for me, right? Because
Right.
you can do more by working less if you do it more effectively. Okay, and that kind of stuff. And that's
if you build systems, right? That's the big thing. But nonetheless, what I'm driving at here, or why I found this story interesting when you sent it to me, again, another story that I allowed History's Big Man send was, it's a little inside baseball. It's a little local to Austin and what have you.
Well, and I want to bring this up before you wrap it up, because one of the things I found in this that I found interesting is even a person like Joe Rogan that is a comedian. Okay, he partnered with a stop it jerk. He partnered with a guy, Adam Egget, right? Which is actually, he was the manager of the store. He was a manager at another big improv comedy out in Tempe, Arizona. A big, you're right, comedy.
Yeah.
So he's ran 2 successful comedy clubs, and he's partnered with him because, look, Joe Rogan, great comedian, but that doesn't mean he knows anything about running a comedy store, right? So the fact is that he did, again, that's a big entrepreneur thing. You've got to know sometimes that you got to take on a good partner that knows what they're doing about
business. I think he's well capitalized. Joe Rogan is well capitalized. He has a huge brand. And he's brought in Adam Egget, who's successful at running other comedy clubs. This is just one of those things I look at and go, this can't fail. It just won't.
I think the chances of it failing are slim to none.
So low.
I mean, it's
yeah.
Anyway, do your wrap up, you weirdo. Okay, I'm sorry I took you off your train to get a entrepreneur. Well,
listen,
right?
My name is Danny, and for Idiots versus Idiots and my co-host, the Big Man, I'm signing off, reminding you that some have said success is the best revenge, but I've personally found that actual revenge is more satisfying.
This show with you is your revenge on me for forever, okay?
All
I'm saying is it's painful. That's it.
Well, you signed up for it, and you deserve everything you get.
We'll see you next time, folks.